Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Erasmus Expeditions. We are here with a very special presentation, I guess you would call it, although that sounds a bit formal. This is going to be a wrap party for the Whispers and Fragments game that was set in the world of Momentum. Alan will not be able to join us this afternoon, and very, very sad about that. Missing him and being able to kind of talk a little bit about Haroon. Jeff, I believe, will be stopping by here in just a few moments, and we'll shuffle people around as we need. But we're going to go ahead and get started. As I was just saying before we went live, I have no plan. I don't know what we're going to do or what we're going to talk about, but we'll make it work. So if you have questions, go ahead and drop those in the chat, and we will try to work those in and answer them as best we can. So I guess before anything, I will go ahead and warn, as normal, we're all adults. This is an adult channel. This was an adult game, so more than likely the subject matter and the language will be a little bit more mature. So if that's the kind of stuff that bothers you, then you shouldn't be watching this. But if it doesn't bother you, then welcome. We'll teach you some new phrases, I'm sure. All right, first up, I'm going to pass things over to my players. They can introduce themselves, plug anything that they're working on, etc., and then we'll figure out where we're going to start. So speaking of where we're going to start, Jake, why don't you go first?
Hey, Internet, it's Jake. Mini-Terrain Domain is where you can usually find me when I'm not here in this incredible world of Momentum. And you can find Jeremy and others over there. I think at any given point, many members of this campaign have been on MTD, and if you haven't, just tell me and we'll get you on there. And we run games over there. We do some other stuff too on Twitch with miniatures and terrain and that kind of stuff. Yeah, that's me.
Excellent. Always happy to have you on the channel, Jake, and yeah, I'm looking forward. Was very bummed I had to miss our Dawnbringer session last week, especially after having to not kick off my campaign also on your channel last week. Last week was kind of rough here in Texas, and yeah, I'm looking forward to kind of getting back into things.
You didn't miss anything because we wound up not playing.
Yeah, exactly. I guess I am a little thankful that it didn't happen, but maybe. All right, next up we have Austin.
Hello. As always, nothing to plug, nothing to introduce, nothing to talk about in particular. Just excited to chat with everybody. It was a real great game. Frog in my throat. Real great game, and I'm real excited to just kind of check in with everybody and talk about it a little bit. And I am also kind of bummed that we didn't get to kick off that campaign last week, but I hope you're doing okay, Jeremy, because I feel for you. It sounds like a real shit show down there, and I'm so sorry. But take your time. We'll play when we can. Always cool to get yourself sorted. But excited.
Absolutely. Yeah, luckily things seem to be stabilized here. We're back up in like the 60s now, like as far as the temperature goes. It's beautiful and sunny outside, so like it's like nothing ever happened. Except for, all the stuff that did happen. But no, we've got power, we've got heat, everybody's cozy and comfortable. Several different members of my family had water pipes that burst in their house, so we've been helping them tear out flooring and all that fun stuff. So it's been a week. I actually didn't go to work at all last week because of either the road conditions or the fact that our building didn't have power or anything in between. So I go to work tomorrow, and I'm both looking forward to it, and also I'm really, really not, because it seems like the longer you go without having gone to work and then you have to go back in, it's so much harder. And I know it's going to be just an absolute circus when I get back to the office. So, but speaking of circus, Tim.
That's the right answer. I wasn't sure which direction you were going to go, but that's it. That's legit. I am Tim, and I am just glad to be a part of this campaign. In terms of plugging things, Absolute Tabletop has formally partnered with Sean Tompkin, creator of Iron Sworn, and we are working together collaboratively on a new game based off of Ironsworn called Ironforn Starforged, which is Ironsworn space sci-fi RPG, and it is really cool working with a creator as awesome as Sean. And so if you are interested in that kind of stuff, keep an eye out. Sometime in the next couple of months, we will be kickstarting that, and I couldn't be more excited. So yeah.
That's awesome. I have not had the chance to check out Starforged yet, but everything that I have seen and heard about it looks really amazing, and it's super awesome that you guys now are getting to work, and especially Matt are now getting to work with his dad to kind of, you know, create this juggernaut, and I'm very excited to be able to throw some money y'all's way once again. All right. Next up is Lloyd.
Hello there. I'm Lloyd. I run the YouTube channel Jarl DM, where I have some games. I'm also on Dwight's channel every week, basically now, painting little dudes on Thursdays, which is Big Bearded Nerd. So I'm slowly weaseling my way into the MTD inner circle by hanging out with Dwight a lot. I'm also bummed about the campaign that didn't start because I'm not in it. So that's a big bummer for me. Pretty furious about it. I wrote some angry poems over the last few weeks that I didn't get into that campaign. And I'm also pretty excited about Starforged. I saw some of the art on Twitter, and it's like grimy and gross and has the right vibe, I think. So that's pretty exciting. And yeah, I'm hyped to just sit around and talk about this game that I really loved a lot.
Excellent, man. Yeah. I'm looking forward to the Scald reading us poems later. I'm looking forward to hearing some of those. Excellent. Every time we sit down to watch Vikings, I'm like, Lloyd's somewhere out there in the world right now, and I bet he's smiling. we're I think about halfway through the last season. Some good stuff. I miss a lot of the old characters, but still good stuff. All right, speaking of good stuff, last but certainly not least, Jeff has joined us. Jeff.
Yes, hello. I have arrived finally, just in time. I'm Jeff. You can find me mostly on Tabletop Terrors alongside Tim and James. I'm sure Tim has already plugged all of that stuff, so I will just defer to what he's already did. I'm seeing Tim do the I didn't do that face.
I did. Yeah, I actually did the AbTab Starforged Kickstarter coming up. Perfect. And I did it because I thought, you know what? Jeff and I are both always plugging Tabletop Terrors. I was like, I'll let him do it for once.
The one time that I'm not here to see that you didn't do it. Yeah, so I'm on a channel called Tabletop Terrors. Tim is there as well, as you have probably gathered by now, alongside his brother James. We do a lot of videos about tabletop RPG stuff. We have a Patreon where we do game design stuff as well. If you're interested in any of that, you can check Tabletop Terrors out.
Excellent. Anybody who has mentioned a channel or anything like that, you should be able to find them still down in the description of the video down below. I do highly recommend that you go and check out their stuff. Each one of these people creates fantastic content. Austin doesn't have a channel of his own yet. Caveat, yet. But he's creating fantastic content anyways, everywhere he goes. He's a fantastic player. Sweet. Okay, so I'm going to pop over to the chat and see if we have anything going. No questions yet from the chat, so
I have a question for everybody.
Sure.
If this is acceptable. We
Absolutely.
can all like name bits that we liked from the game. I had like some thoughts about like what's the most heroic thing you saw someone else do, like a different character.
Hell yeah, that's a great way to start. Anybody have a place to start kicking off? Anything that comes to mind?
I mean, I think for me that would probably be like the Ingvarad sacrifice. Like that was one of
Yeah.
my favorite moments overall, and it was like the most like tragically heroic moment. Like that was, yeah, I think that would probably be the one for me. Someone sticks out.
I swear I didn't set this up so you would say nice things about
Yeah,
me.
no,
That was not the
I
intention.
know,
He wants
I know.
all
It's
the
funny because I
backslappery.
was as soon as you asked, I was like, okay, how am I going to say this? Well, I'll just dive in and not preamble. But
Yeah, it was a super nice way of like turning a bad necessity into an awesome game moment too. Of like, we had to do that
Exactly.
because you weren't going to be able to play for a while, and then suddenly it's somehow become like one of the best moments of the game in that moment, even if it was a bummer that you had to step away.
oh, can
Yeah.
I? Okay.
It was really cool to
Well, no, you finish what you're going to say.
you go. It was really cool to come back and see like the impact that it had, like that it wasn't just like, oh, and then Lloyd had to leave the game.
Right.
Like it was like really clear that everyone was still thinking about it and that it had like impacted the characters in a major way, like a name change and everything, right? So like that was really cool.
That moment didn't happen in that way if I wasn't playing the character with the backstory that I was playing. You weren't playing the character type that you were playing, plus everything that had happened up to that point. It was bizarre how narratively well that moment fit, that it seemed almost like it was just, oh crap, Lloyd sacrificing himself and his character is no longer a part, and neither is he. And then ultimately it comes back in a way that becomes such an incredible and powerful moment for everybody involved, that there's no way that could have been oh well, Lloyd's not playing anymore and we're never going to mention it again.
Cool to see. Yeah. Which like is sometimes a thing that happens in games where like someone has to leave.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, well, it's a bummer for one session, and then you sort of go on with the game and it like is forgotten about. But that's clearly it's had like, well, this game and the characters are so like closely like emotionally connected that I think it makes sense. But that's not the usual, I think, when it comes to games like this.
Well, and I think it speaks
So,
a
Lloyd,
lot
I just
to. Sorry, Austin. I think it speaks a lot to your portrayal of Ingvarad. Like, she became such a central part of the group. She was the beating heart of the party and was connected to every other character in some facet or another. And having her forcibly ripped out, it caused real trauma and real pain to the rest of the characters. And everybody did a fantastic job of making sure that that was a consistent note for the rest of the campaign. And when it came time to have you step away, that exit just made perfect sense. Like that was true to Ingvarad up to that point, and it made a lot of narrative consistency in the behavior and the choices, and it was a really impactful moment.
It created this unique situation too that parallels life. I mean, it's such a great acting exercise and role playing and everything else, which is we have this leadership figure that's sort of our moral compass and is the linchpin holding our group together. And when she's taken away from us in the way that she was, it forced maturity on the characters. Katya had to own up to the sacrifice and what happened, to the point that in the moment she changed her name as a way of honoring their relationship. But aside from my character, what I noticed, the evolution and maturity that really started to happen in particular, was Darian and Bastarad sort of became these co-leaders of the group in the wake of Ingvarad, where Ingvarad was a sort of pure and like I said, the sort of moral compass for the group. Darian and Bastarad became complementary sides of a coin, that the two of them essentially became co-leaders of our group.
Yeah, I was gonna say something like very much along those lines. Is like Ingvarad was like such a centerpiece to the way the group like acted and behaved, and like the decisions that we made. Like when Ingvarad was then like pulled out of that, it suddenly became this thing where it's like if none of us change, this group explodes and like falls apart. And like we can't have that happen. There's too much on the line for that to happen. So we have to change. We cannot be the same people that we were before because we don't have the guide rails of Ingvarad to keep us on that path. So we either fall off the path or we start finding a way to walk it ourselves. It was really
And
interesting to see everyone kind of take that in their own way.
and I feel like Haroon, the way Alan played Haroon was there as sort of like if you've ever been to the amusement park and you go on those loud gas powered vehicles where you feel like you're driving but you're really on a rail. Haroon's that rail. He was there. I think that if Darian and Bastarad didn't step up, I think Haroon would have stepped up. But Haroon, particularly the character that he was playing within this campaign, maybe he and I guess we won't know without Helen the way in, but maybe he felt like he couldn't take leadership of a group that was he was such an outsider of initially. Um I don't know, that's speculation, but I do feel like Haroon was there as sort of a potential way that if nobody else could live up to it, because there was no way that Katvarad was going to be able to lead a group, and Sabanos, I don't think he ever fully knew what was going on. So
I mean, it's easy to forget, but like Haroon was when he first came into the party, the most distrusted person out of all of us. He was literally a member of the main, at that point, the main enemy faction that we had dealt with. So
Yep.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of similar feeling to like when Ned Stark was killed off in Game of Thrones. There's this like very
what?
sudden
Spoiler alert.
Well, if you hadn't seen it yet, guess what? Darth Vader is Luke's father. At the like, there's this sudden like truncation of her character arc, and instead of being able to kind of see where her character arc continues, instead we see elements of what she has imparted on the other characters come out in them stronger. Like this kind of impact that she's made on these other characters, she still kind of lives on, but through multiple people instead of just her.
I wanted to ask a question that is just from GM to GM. So when Jeremy, did you decide that Lloyd's character Ingvarad was going to be the final big bad, and who was it before it was Ingvarad, or did you know?
So the Shadow was always going to be the big bad. Whenever Jake had introduced that as his patron for Katvarad, and the story started revolving around the god of light having been, missing and kidnapped and everything, I was like, well, that makes really perfect, like, diametric sense. You've got the Lord of Light who's being messed with, and obviously a Shadow would have a beef with the Lord of Light, so that's going to be a good counterpoint. And then as we started getting towards the end, I was like, man, it would be really awesome to have Ingvarad come back, because she purposefully stepped into the Shadow, literally knowing that she was giving herself over to the Shadow, like to be used and manipulated, in place of Katvarad. So I was like, well, I'll get in touch with Lloyd and see if that's something that he's interested in and he's going to be available for and all that kind of stuff. And when I reached out and he said yes, then I was like, okay, cool. I know exactly how I want this to go. Ingvarad will effectively be possessed by the Shadow and start things off, but I really, really want the players to come up with some kind of creative way to divorce them from one another. And then Ingvarad can play the good guy, helping them one last time to defeat the ultimate evil. And it just, you guys, I relied on you guys, and it paid off in spades.
second favorite heroic moment was definitely Darian coming in with the completely unexpected spell casting and cure wounds. That was so good. That was so damn good. I loved that moment.
That was going to be
Payoff,
mine too.
Yeah.
That was going to be mine too. And I was going to ask, Jeff, how long were you sitting on that? Because you mentioned it was a long time in the works. Like Lloyd said, this payoff. I mean, how long did you know?
So I took a level in Bard. The next time we leveled up after Darian and Ingvarad talked about the religion that first time.
That is
So-
huge.
That's so long ago. That's
a year and a
that's-
half
wow.
or whatever in real time
Jeez.
of me sitting on that class and it's just like
It's incredible.
it's got to be the right moment to take to bring that out to light. Like it'd be such like a big character development point for him to hit to be able to use this. And then it's just like no moment ever felt like right enough. And until suddenly like this just like fell into my lap literally perfectly. I couldn't have like wrote a better script for it if you gave me the pen to try. So yeah, I was sitting on that one for literally 15 sessions and like a year and a half worth of time or something until finally it got to come to light at the very end. So I'm very glad that it had the hit that it did because yeah, I was.
So around the 1 year
Yeah.
mark, when both Austin and I revealed elements that we'd been sitting on for a year, Jeff was just over there going, just wait.
Yep.
Just
I'm
wait.
literally just looking at the couple spell slots on my character sheet like, so I'm going to have that moment too someday. It'll come.
But
That's awesome.
that's an incredible testament to the way that we all played these characters, and we talked about it a lot at the wrap up of games or offline. We talked a lot about this, how we were all emotionally invested on a level that for a lot of us we had never been, and to have this kind of interpersonal relationships. I can honestly say that at no point in this game was I looking for where's the moment that I get to make this cool spell happen, or when do I get to grab the spotlight and pull it on myself. It was always about within the world, within the character roles, what made sense. There were moments that I thought of things like spell selection and things that I thought of as a player, and I thought, no, my character would not do that, because by that point Ingvarad's in my head as a player and as a character. This is after Lloyd had left, and it's like, because by that point making those immature rash decisions was behind her. It just became about the things we were doing. Jeff, you could have at any point after taking that level, you could have been, all right, cool. Next session, I'm going to boom, check out what I can do.
Yeah.
But the fact that you sat on that for so long, because it didn't make sense.
Yeah. I mean, how many Bardic Inspiration dice could have fudged rolls to be a little bit better? How many Cure Wounds
Right.
balls could have come in like and have been really mechanically effective? But yeah. It was not right, which is for me, that's a big deal because I'm like a mechanics optimization nut. So
I was just thinking that. I was like, from conversations you and I have had, that was awesome, because not only that, but I mean, you're talking about one whole level of other things that you would gain as a bard. That's a level where some of us were like, hey, I'm now dipping into this as a rogue, or I'm getting this. You kind of had to skip a lot of it, or this is my question. Did you reskin stuff ever that was bardic to look roguish?
No.
Okay.
It was all just rogue a level behind until
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Commitment.
Big.
That's incredible. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that made the game work so well is the fact that all of you were willing to shelve optimization or, the mechanical side of your characters, often for long stretches of time, to just devote yourself to what was going on with the characters, either inter-party or with the setting itself. You guys were very invested, and it paid off a lot for me as a dungeon master, and I think for one another. Karen Davies plays in the other campaign that I run here on the channel, and she said this about that campaign, and it really made me kind of stop and realize that the same was true for Whispers and Fragments as well. And she said that she really, truly wanted to know what was happening in the story of all of the other characters in the party. She wanted to see their stories play out, their arc. She truly cared as an audience member, and that created more investment for her as a player. And it made me realize that the same thing, like I said, is very much true for Whispers and Fragments. Like, obviously, I have a bias towards the story that I'm trying to tell, but I also am interested in each of these people because in my mind they've become realistic, and I've cared about them long enough that I want to see how things are going to end for them.
I was like really invested as Ingvarad, like less in her growth, because Ingvarad was like a rock anyway. She was certain of things, that was like one of her strengths, is that she had absolute knowledge that the gods were real and she knew that she was on the right path. So her character growth wasn't actually that important to me, but really important was everybody else's character growth, because they were all broken in large ways, and she was a way to try and help that, like Bastarad's drinking early on, and like Darian's cynicism, and like Catfarad's immaturity and stuff. All of that like was really important to me, like more than my own growth as the character. Like it was more important to see them grow and like help them achieve that somehow, which is really not typical, I think, for the way that I play games.
That's actually a really good segue to the question that Kenya posed. Scroll back up just a bit here. What was the most unexpected growth that you saw in another character?
The scene where Darian and Ingvarad talked about prayer was like really unexpected, and like I still remember it very clearly. Like really stuck out as a scene that I wasn't expecting to happen, because he was like quite cynical and like roguish or whatever. That was really unexpected to me. And then to see that like we were just talking about, like 15 sessions later turn into like, here is actual faith and here it comes or whatever, is wild, like that's really impressive and like, yeah, unique.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think a lot of that was just like when you're so far down in like the depths of darkness, like you just want anything to hold on to. Like you'll just look for whatever's there, and Ingvarad was there. I think I just kind of tried to run with that of like, if you're looking for purpose, like you'll give a try to anything, even if it doesn't stick, you'll at least see what it's about. He saw what it was about. I think for me, as far as like character growth, I loved seeing Katya sort of come into her own as Katvarad, especially seeing like how many times like earlier on in the game that Katya's magic got us into trouble, literally downed party members, like was causing problems, like throwing tantrums, getting into fights with the other party members, which was all great. Don't get me wrong. I loved every second of it. But seeing her go from like that, the like immature, both in terms of like mechanical competence and as a person, and then suddenly by the end of the session, she's in control of her magic. It's at her command. It's not causing any problems. In fact, it's like one of the things kind of keeping us moving and keeping us together and helping us out. And seeing her become sort of much more sure of herself, what she wants, like who she is. It was such a drastic shift, from session 1 to session whatever the last one was.
25?
Huge chasm
26.
of what she became. Like, I don't think anyone could have expected that far, of growth.
Well, and that's one of those things that, I could say, yeah, I made these decisions. I felt like this was the way to go. But it was the initial influence of Ingvarad, and that bizarre thing that happened where Lloyd left the campaign, but his character never left us. she was always there. How many times did we invoke Ingvarad's name, or just in internal monologues mention, I can't do this thing because of Ingvarad, but not just Ingvarad. Darian and Bastarad in particular were these my two dads sort of for Katvarad, really helping to stay the course. And I could have flipped a switch and just said, okay, well, now I'm going to play a light side Jedi the rest of the game. But even a couple sessions before the end, when we were heading towards that dwarven city, I was still screwing up. Katya was still screwing up with her magic and part of that was a player screwing up, but I just when I cast that spell on the river and put everybody in the sickening cloud, and I'm only meant to affect the bad guys, but it worked so well that Katvarad's still trying to figure out these new powers and not quite giving up the dark side. She was always tempering necrotic stuff into these new lighter powers, but also a huge amount of credit goes to Jeremy as the game master for essentially letting me take what was my warlock subclass and switching it on the fly. You don't normally do that within a game. You multi-class into something else. But I literally went from a Hexblade to a Celestial Warlock, and I think there was about 2 or 3 sessions it took for the full transition to take place, where I stopped using the previous classes. I rebuilt the character as a Celestial. But it was really everybody at the table playing into that sort of acted in a way you would expect from somebody that's the youngest member of any given group, especially somebody as young as Katvarad. She's looking to everybody to influence. And I joked about this early in the campaign, but part of it goes to my own teenage daughter, who I sort of modeled the temperament on. In the course of this campaign, she went from being a 16-year-old to an 18-year-old. And I got to see some of those maturity levels taking place and input and the immaturity, if I'm being honest, and got to parlay some of that into how I portrayed the character in what I felt was a more realistic
I remember being
fashion.
so frustrated with Katvarad. We were like on a ship, and it was like about a gun, I think. And you had like carved fuck into the gun or something. But you had just done something terrible before that.
I totally forgot I had done that.
Can't remember what it was. Like something had happened.
That's exactly what I did in Dwarven. I had
I was the only other person that could read Dwarven, I think, and said nothing about it.
Just remember like shadow creation incident thing.
Yes, that's what it was. Because you like summoned a corpse or something.
Summoned
summoned a shadow, I think.
Yeah.
And it was like, do you not understand how dangerous this is? And you were like, I'm just doing my thing, Mom.
Hanging up on you, trying to tell you how badly you messed up, and then of course
that was after the first mess up when I almost killed us all with Hellish Rebuke in a noxious gas cloud.
No, it was we were interviewing someone or interrogating someone, and there was like some shadow magic there was a big fight, and I can just remember being so frustrated. I was like, "Listen to me, I'm trying to help you," and it really felt like, "How do I reach these kids?" Like I can't get through to her.
There's a warlock ability, like at a certain level, where when you kill an enemy, you can have them like live on as a shade under your command or something. And she did that in the game, and that was just like all of us were just like, "What the hell is she doing?
Yeah, this is not okay."
Yeah. But yeah, it was great because it was so difficult, and it was really well done by you, I think, because it was so difficult to get through to Katya, even if you were being reasonable, especially if you were being reasonable, and if you were just like trying to explain to her like, there's real danger here. It's not just cool shit you can do. You know, there's demons involved. And she's like, whatever, you just don't understand. And like, you're just like, listen to me.
It was so
That's-
agonizing in the most brilliant way. Like you
That-
did it.
I mean,
Yeah,
that's
yep.
teens.
It was
That's
so-
teens. They think they know everything and are experiencing it for the first time, and there's no way you could possibly understand it.
Yeah, yep.
And I just
So big,
want to
big credit to my daughter for that.
well, and to everybody else who wasn't Kat Varad, it's really difficult to play that kind of a character without it derailing the game and being a big, negative thing. And this instead was character conflict. And the way that, Jake, you leaned into it as heavily as possible, but it was really cool that everyone could get pissed off in the sessions, and I would watch them and I'd be like, well, I think they were really upset. But then walk away from that session knowing, hey, I was really upset in character, but I get it. And that's not a guarantee. So I just want to just commend everybody that it was really cool to be able to have fun and laugh after the game.
Debriefed.
Right. But in the session, like you say, carving dwarven swear words on the gun and maybe trying to accidentally kill each other. So well done.
That was definitely the session where at the end of that one, we kind of took a couple moments after the stream to be like, we're all good, right? Everything.
Yeah.
Because I'm telling you, for me as a player, that was a first to have that level of intensity. And there were moments where I thought, oh, I fucked up. I made a big mistake. But as the scene unfolds, I start to realize, oh no, okay. Yeah, this is all good. This is 100% in character, but also just reacting to the way things went. And it was very important that we had those conversations out of character at the end to just check in with everybody.
Yeah, this is
And
one of
I
those
just remember-
games- So you go.
Oh, I was going to say, I just remember like that debrief just like beaming because I was just delighted because like I guess I'm a messy bitch that lives for the drama because those were like my favorite sessions, the ones where shit got intense like that.
Yeah, me too. It's one of those games where you like realize at the end that you've been like holding your breath, and then you get to the debrief and you're like, whew, oh wow, okay, is everybody good? Like, yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
that's one of the
remember
things.
how many sessions that exact, literally just like, all right, Jeremy would be like, all right, we're off stream, and just all of us would be like, oh god.
Well, and that's one of the great things about like being a player or like even an actor when you're in a scene that is that intense. If you have the level of trust that's established between the people that are involved, you can lean really heavy into some dark emotions, some really strong emotions, and understand that everybody else is going to be there to kind of keep you from falling in, if you will. So it's a kind of a trust exercise. And then whenever you're done, you realize, shit, like I was actually feeling like real, true emotion in that scene. You lose yourself a little bit. And having the freedom to do that is incredible as an actor, because it conjures up a kind of performance that you just can't tap into otherwise. You can't fake it. But it is essential that you have that comfort level and trust with the people that are in the scene with you. And I think that that's definitely something that you all helped to establish very early on in the game and continue throughout the entire campaign.
If you watch the whole thing as an arc, you also see that we had these, and again, Jeremy, you kind of gave us the freedom to do this. We had these counterpoints of levity where we participated in the dwarven Aethercar race, where it was essentially the only thing I really remember from that. The main thing is Lloyd and Jeff doing everything in their power as NPC racers to kill each other.
I've barely laughed as much as I did in that session. Like,
it was such a perfect
so
counterpoint to those other intense episodes that we can just have so much fun just screwing with each other within the context of the story.
Yeah, Austin put in the side chat, curious to hear everyone's like favorite heartbreaking moment and everyone's favorite lighter moment. And that was absolutely my favorite lighter moment is that Aethercar race. It was just like so insane and absurd compared to like the rest of the campaign, which was like so real and so intense. Just to have like that one session to just completely go like as far off the rails as I've ever been, like in an RPG session. Like I was just completely unhinged, like in the
With
best.
the most
Yeah.
the most bonkers characters
Yeah.
that were
I
just
can't
like
remember what they were called. We had these two dwarven racers, right? And
Slasher and
yeah,
Flamer, like something ridiculous like that.
Yeah, that's definitely my favorite light moment too. That's the one that stands out.
I also
from
think
kind
that
of a like I'm a little biased, just like this is just my favorite moment that I got to like be a part of. I really loved, there was a moment where like we were face to face in like an underground like a pub or something with the opera singer, and like listening to their pitch as we were all just like, okay, let's hear them out. This might be reasonable. They might have something. And as it slowly went on and got more and more obvious that they're like, we're a death cult and we would like to end the world. And like, I already just was like raging at them. And just that moment of being like, can I go now? Like, we good? We listened to enough, right? Like, and then just launching at them that's possibly one of my favorite moments just in an RPG in general, that like, that felt so like weirdly like Tarantino, but like in a Lovecraftian way. Like it was great.
and I think a lot of the levity that came with the introduction of Sabanos was a very much needed kind of salve, because the story was so dark and so heavy, and it had little pinpoints of levity throughout. But when Sabanos stepped in, there was it's almost like somebody opened a window into like a stuffy room, if you will. Like it's like all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, there is other things that are going on. There's people's stories outside of this that aren't quite as dismal yet. And you know, it's a fresh air that kind of livens the place up a bit. And I think Sabanos stepping in and not having an idea just how desperate this group was and what was going on wholly, was a really nice undercurrent that was introduced partway through.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that it played, because I'd seen episodes and my concern was that I was going to come in and it was going to be like the wrong tone and discordant. Like, hey, you're coming into our game and making jokes. You know what I mean? But I'm like, it felt so, I don't know. I just felt like that was the character. That was the one that was in my head. And after following through the questionnaire, that's the character that started to come up. And so it was really cool that everyone did actually like kind of dig it and that it fit into that place, because I also didn't want to be the person that came around all Chuckle House and you're all doing this very cool thing. And I'm like, ha ha ha, but what about, you know? And so I tried to be very thoughtful and role play it as well, not just try to make jokes, but find humor in moments where his obliviousness or his lack of decorum or his stating a fact, regardless of emotion, is kind of funny if you say it the right way, you know. And so that's what I tried to play it off of. Make it real and find the humor in actually conveying real information or real thoughts and stuff like that.
Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, what I liked so much about Sabanos and why I thought it like worked so well is, for one, you're just thoughtful as a player to like know when to do that and when not to. Like, it's not like, all right, here's the moment where Katya finally figures out that, you know, this tomb of her mom is empty or whatever, and then Sabanos is like, like it's just like, like, you know, as a player when to do those and when not to do them. And what was especially good about it too is like, the humor was not in like Tim cracking jokes at the table. It was in like the interactions between Sabanos and the world. So like it was funny because of these people acting the way that they were, not because you were, you know, trying to put some sick zingers in there.
And I think it worked because Sabanos himself was not a comedic character. It wasn't a he is out for the gag, you know. It is the juxtaposition of Sabanos' reaction and his apathy to everything against this very sensitive, dark story that's going on. That juxtaposition is where the comedy generated from. and I think that's why it worked without disrupting kind of the story that was already being built. So, yeah, does anybody else have any favorite lighter moments or heartbreaking moments? Going back to Austin's question.
I know we all kind of hovered around the Ingvarad departure as an important moment, but I don't want to gloss over the Bastarad's story was very tragic from the outset. With I'm drawing a blank on her name. What's the kid's
The
name?
daughter, Vidaris.
Vidaris or
Yeah. That whole thing, the manner in which we found her, and just, and she wound up being somebody that, 'cause it can be burdensome at times to have an important NPC that you're dragging around with you, and they don't contribute to the combats or to the interactions other than, oh, this is an escort mission, we got to keep this person safe. It never felt like that in this game. It felt like she was somebody that was with us that we had to keep safe because she was important to Bastarad.
It was a great vehicle for Ingvarad to help Bastarad become the person he's supposed to be, I think. Like, because, the implication has always been that Ingvarad raised that girl, really, and, like, look after her and stuff, because Bastarad couldn't. So then, like, there was a chance for Bastarad to, like, show that he can do that now and that he does care and all that sort of stuff. So I think it was really useful in that way. And I usually would be a person who'd be like, GM NPC, God, but like it actually worked super well. I think it was like really important to like the growth of Ingvarad and Bastarad and their relationship as well, how they connect with each other. Really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it even got to the point where, like, I remember, I don't know if this was in the game or like in an after game or pre-game debrief, but I remember we were talking about, like, I mean, it makes sense to leave her, like, to depart from her here, but that feels really wrong at the same time, where we were all like, wait, we want this DM NPC to stay with us.
Yeah.
Like, no, yeah, we do, because she's a great important character. And like, I don't know, I really enjoyed that. Like, I also, like, at the end of the game, when like there was the opportunity to go into that light, like Bastarad was never going to go, because like he was going back to Arinovat like immediately. Like, if he's able to survive this thing, he's leaving and he's going back to be with his daughter again. Because so, like, I think that was like the growth that I don't know, it was fun to do that as something. Like, I came into the game really wanting to play something, like, I always try to play like a character that's like tries to talk out the problems. Like, I'm Mr. Rogers, so I always play Mr. Rogers, or like Picard, where I'm like, okay, we're gonna do this the peaceful way, as long as we can. But so I wanted to play somebody that was like, no, he's a bit of an anger-filled dick. Like, he's more of a jerk. So like, even with like, I remember there were some moments with Katya where like he was like, no, you should embrace, like, you're powerful, like you're able to do some really powerful things, and like there are bad people out there, and like we gotta, like, sometimes we gotta deal with them. Like,
Yeah.
Go
Go ahead.
Heartbreaking moments. The one that still stands out for me, and it was like very early on, was still like being up on that airship and like Bastarad, especially, and Ingvarad, like discovering Bastarad's wife, I believe it was, like hooked up to that crazy ether thing up in that ship, and just that realization of like, oh God, like this is not how this was supposed to go. Like, we were supposed to find her and help her, and like now we're in the situation where it's like, nope, that's clearly off the table. And then to not even really have the right moment to be able to deal with it and process it, because immediately we crashed that airship and killed Kalp too. So it was just like, like a string of horrible tragedy. Like, that entire couple sessions was just miserable, in character. And it's just, yeah, for Bastrad especially, but for everybody, that was like such a difficult difficult little bit.
Yeah,
and there were arcs. So go ahead.
No, please.
I was just going to say that specifically for Bastarad and Darian and Katvarad, all of you, when I began, had arcs after that even. So the arcs that you took to get to where, Ingvarad is gone, as you mentioned, everyone had to kind of shift, but it didn't shift and then stay there. So Darian didn't just do the bare minimum to fill in the gap for Ingvarad, and Bastarad didn't just do the bare minimum to be the flip side of Darian, and Katvarad didn't just do the bare minimum, in terms of possessing this new power and being like, yeah, I kind of this is what I do now. From when I started, session to session, I watched an arc after that. So there was this arc where, like, even for me, Bastarad changed so much and was this, it's so funny to hear you say that he was like this anger-filled dick, because it's like not the Bastarad that Sabanos knew, even from the beginning.
I think there were a couple times like early on where I was kind of he was a bit of a cause of tension in the group, just because like he clearly was about to like start some shit with somebody, and they were all like, no, calm down, like we got to talk to them first. I'm like, yeah, but we could talk with fists. So, like,
and I love that because the character that I experienced was talking things through while everyone else is talking about crazy stuff, and you were the one who was the heart of saying, hey, we really probably shouldn't do this if we can avoid it. So I could go on and on about the different characters, but those three arcs specifically, it was really cool to play alongside, because I saw some of the early sessions. So when I started, I hadn't seen all of them. So I was like, oh, these are totally different characters. So everyone did a really good job of making it feel like a novelized sort of really good arc that drew from the loss of someone that they loved, and then didn't just fall into the depths of the despair that could easily be this world, but instead decided to say, no, I'm going to rise to the occasion. And it didn't feel ham-fisted or cheesy. So everyone just did a killer job.
And
seriously, like I would
to...
watch the TV show of this campaign with very few changes. Like it would be like the character arcs work just throughout. I don't know.
Going back
it's
to
unusual that something so organic. Oh, sorry, Jeremy.
No, you're good. And I was going to kind of reiterate a similar point. Kind of going back to the question of like whose story arc, whose development kind of impressed you a lot. And I would definitely say that Bastarad is his story was one of the most diverse from beginning to end. He changed so much over the course of the story, because he was in the beginning very bullheaded and brutish and solving problems with violence first. But the introduction of Vidaris and the loss of Ingvarad tempered a lot of that in him, to the point where we saw a radical shift in him. But it wasn't a sudden just Austin saying, I'm just not going to do that anymore. It felt like a natural transition between those two portrayals of Bastarad. It still felt like those two different portrayals were still the same person. That was a believable shift in his persona and his approach to the way he handled things.
Yeah, I mean, looking at like unexpected growth you saw in a character like that whole arc of Bastarad towards the end of going back to his hometown and having to like navigate that whole situation, like just like try taking the Bastarad from session 3 and putting him like in that position, and like imagine how different that scenario plays out. Like it would be insane how different that whole situation would be in that if you did that. It's like seeing him like basically go through that with like as much like grace and calmness as someone could go through that situation with, after everything that had happened. Like mostly still like just going through and talking to these people with words, and seeing him like really try to do what he could for this place that he had left was like such a remarkable difference, compared to the earlier scenes. And especially seeing that sort of like culminate with his little like vision quest that he had like while we were there. The sleep dream scene that he did was just like such a big like peak moment, I think, for like the sort of like cherry on top of how far Bostrat had come up until that session, and still even after that.
And I think it's worth mentioning
I think
too.
he started out as a character that.
Go ahead, Austin.
Well, I was gonna say, I think he started out as a character that felt like completely alone, like he had lost everything already. And the reintroduction of Vidaris started a path of like, there may be a way for me not to be. And then by the end of it, he felt like he was responsible for protecting her and anyone he could, because he was one of the people that was in the position to do it. And because he like actually gave a shit about, what happened to the people he cared about.
Yeah, and talking about character arcs, I know he's not here, but Alan playing Haroon, like his character didn't go through as drastic of a change throughout the course of the game, but he started with a very clear moment in his character's arc of, I'm walking away from this life that I know because of something that's happened before I'm joining the game. And he took a really good he made a lot of really good choices about how to portray a character who had left a life behind through regret, or guilt or what have you, and is trying to lead a new life, and that the difficulties of constantly comparing how I should do something to how I would have done something. He did a really good job of portraying that with his character, and especially having been, this elven, strict paladin that belongs to this, very devout order that has clear direction, into a character that had more doubt, less self-assurance, because of his experience with the Bonekin and with Ingvarad and things like that, and it completely shifted his character's worldview before the game started, and it was really cool to watch him pepper that in as we were playing. Cool. So Kenya has asked, was there anything that you wish there was more time to explore more that wasn't? Not just with characters, but also with the setting or a story hook that might have gotten bypassed.
So I actually had something that came to mind for this. I really wish Ingvarad could have been there to see the betrayer Kalasaya in the Pirates Bay area. I would have loved to see her reaction to that story and that being there. And yeah, it was a bit of a shame that we didn't get to see her fight that story, because I think it would have been interesting to hear what she would have thought about that versus what she knew was the real truth of the Kalasaya versus now this whole weird story that no one quite knows if it's true or not, which was not at all a function of things getting overlooked or bypassed, but just as a nature of the way that the game happened and who was there for which sessions. But that was at least something that came to mind.
It was always fun as Ingvarad to come into contact with something that could make her question something, seeing the bones of a god or whatever the situation is, and just finding out if that will galvanize her faith, which is usually what happened, or if it would make her question it. And I think it's often the case that even if she was questioning something outwardly, she would never, because it was also really important to the sanity of everyone else in the group that she was certain and knew what she was doing and had that extremely zealous and pious rock steady faith, because it gave some gravitas and some certainty to everything that she said, I think. And that was really necessary when you have so many people who are what are we doing, what but yeah, it would have been cool to be there for that.
And that's always the really interesting thing about playing a character who is assertive in their beliefs, who is so confident in their faith, is that's where the challenge comes from, is anything that shakes that that causes that doubt or that question to seep in the cracks. That's where you get to explore and be like, well, how much is my character going to deflect and and pretend like they're not getting this new information, or that it doesn't mean what it likely does? Or do I let that start to shift my worldview and change, what happens with the character? And if that is going to be one of those moments, it becomes a very profound, very impactful moment, even if it was something minor in the grand scheme of things.
One of the things I love about playing clerics or paladins is that you have like evidential proof that something is giving you magical power, right? So like there isn't really faith required, because it's proof, like actual physical proof that there is a god and it's giving you power. So then like it's a different situation entirely to playing like a Septon in Game of Thrones or something, where like there's not actually any divine power that you can like summon. So then the question of like faith is more about like, the god is real, like you can feel it in everything that you do, I think. So it's a question about like the morality of that, and because it's a fact that for you at least something is real. So then it's a question of like, how does that affect the way you look at the world? And it was like really fascinating to me, because I'm not a religious person in real life, so I always love to play characters who are like deeply religious or like zealous, to try and see what that's like, try on the shoes and see like how that feels. And I think actually it would be really nice, but that's unfortunately not what's in store for me as a person.
I was just going to say the one thing I was curious of, just kind of curious what would have happened is, before the airship crash that killed Kelp was just beginning to take Katya under his wing and was going to start to teach her how to control her anger and her impulses. And I think that fed into some of the anger after that, because here somebody was showing an interest in her in a different way than Ingvarad had, and was willing to teach her. And it's that kind of that, you don't want to listen to what your parents say. But if somebody else tries to teach you a thing, you're more receptive to it. And I think there's that part of me that's just curious, how would the character of Katya have developed under Kelp's tutelage? And it's just something I can't answer, because there's so many different ways that could have gone. So that's kind of the story arc that never was, for me.
So you sort of wonder, like, would it have been an argument between him and Ingvarad, like pulling at different sides of Katya and stuff? Like, would it have been very different? And I think it would have been, for sure.
Absolutely. And interestingly enough, the whole opera house in Arenavat, that was all stuff that Dave Hubble had come up with as backstory for Kalp. That's the academy that his character actually studied from, to be a blade singer, I think is what he was, that school of wizardry. And so, yeah, I think they're probably, like, even after he left the campaign, I knew that I wanted that part of the story to still be represented. And it turned out to be a lot of fun to play through that. And I think it would have been interesting for sure to see if some of that blade singer approach, especially with it being like a performance art, started to seep into Katya's behavior. That would have been really cool. Okay, so Cole asks... Oh, go ahead, please.
We found an owl in like session 2. It's like giant owl. I think it was really early on. I just wanted to like hang out and pet with the owl like a bit more. It's like really stupid, but I like loved that thing, and I wanted to hang out with it and have it be our pet and like all that.
Yeah, the Oracle Owl. That's what they were. Those are cool little mounts that the elves use. Yeah. So
I think I
go
did
ahead.
think of one other thing that I would have
Please.
liked. I think I thought of one other thing that I would have loved to see explored more, but it just never happened because of like in character decisions, and that was like Darian's backstory and all of the people in Darian's past that we came in contact with, but like never really talked to or got to know very well, because like at that time he had kind of grown past the point to like need to talk to them, which was like it was really cool in character, but I was also kind of sad that we never, like, it sounded like a bunch of really interesting stuff with whatever was going on that like both of those ships and whatever Darian had been doing before we met him.
Yeah, I felt super bad, like out of character, because it's just like Jeremy's done all this like amazing work to bring these people that I made from my backstory into the game, and then like suddenly Darian's just like, that's like not my life anymore. Like these people are not like, they're no longer the critical people in my life, and like I don't really need or have much to do with them anymore. Like he's kind of like past that in a lot of ways, and he's not the person that he was when he knew them. And like I think that sort of created a rift, you know, in his head as far as like interacting with them. But there definitely were some juicy stories to some of those people that we missed out on as a result of that. So apologies, Jeremy, for sort of deflecting on some of those people, but
Not in the least.
It felt right as Darian to go that route.
I think the reason it was so hard for me to think of anything that like I wanted expanded on more was that Jeremy did such a great job of giving us the opportunity to explore everything, that if I didn't explore it, like if we didn't explore it, it's because of choices that we made not to, and those felt right. So I don't know. Yeah, I really appreciate how much of our input you took, Jeremy, and how much of the entire campaign just came from our characters and how much it all tied together. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it speaks volumes that when we ask what we wished was explored more, the main things that everybody says was just like, this character died or left, and we didn't get to see what they would have done with everything that we made. Like, but everything else, yeah, exactly what Austin said. Of like, I don't think there was a single plot or character thread for me, and I'm sure for everybody else, that was missed by you. If anything, it was just like we didn't engage with it fully. But yeah.
There was one thing from the final session that even I didn't think about it until the next day. It was kind of a shower thought, and it was just like, wait, at no point, and I think it got lost in the joy of succeeding, but at no point did anybody call Kotvarad on the fact that she summoned 5 dead dwarves to use in the final battle. And in my mind, the way I picture that is kind of like in Home Alone 2, when they show Kevin down in the park, and then you hear the dad screaming, "You spent $987 on room service." That's Ingvarad. You summoned 5 dead dwarves to help in the battle. And
right, they're like walking into the sunset.
Gotta go.
The after credit scene.
That was it was just a funny thing that nobody mentioned it afterwards. And maybe Kotvarad's kind of like hoping, oh shoot, I hope nobody noticed that.
So I'm gonna piggyback off of the question.
Like,
yeah, that's true. So just to piggyback on the end of Kenya's question about kind of things that didn't get explored that you wished. What about things of the setting? Was there anything about the setting that you wished that you had gotten to interact with more or see more of, or anything like that?
Yes, there was more of the setting that I wanted to explore, not because you missed it, just because it's such a great setting that like I just want to keep playing in it and keep seeing it. I'm sure there's tons of stuff that you've made that just didn't make it into this story that I would love to see, you know, at some point down the line, but that was not a result of anything done wrong by a GM or players, just by the nature of like you can't explore an entire setting in one campaign, and I'm sure there's tons here that we just didn't get to see quite yet, that I wish we could have, because it's all wonderful.
Yeah, I have a similar feeling.
Exactly.
That like I'd play 5 more campaigns in this setting. Like it's just really interesting. I think like there's some really great themes in this world, like of, you know, like it's the end. So what's the point? Sort of like it's and how do people feel in that world? And there's also just like really cool stuff with elves that I thought was fascinating. And like all of the cultures had really like you could spend a whole campaign down in hell for sure, or in Arinavat or something. Like I just think it's great, and yeah, there's plenty of stuff I would love to look at. I think it would be like the elves are really fascinating to me. The Kalendari, is that what they were called? Like relic hunters, and also like the weird dudes with the masks in the city who are like made of mist, and like it's just fascinating. I think it's a really cool setting.
Okay. Let's see. There was another question that came through. Cole asks, for each of the players, what was the DM choice or action that impacted or surprised you the most?
Man, I'm blanking because I remember there was a moment where we were all like jaw dropped, and it was not even that long ago. My brain's just stupid. What?
I sort of talked about mine already, but it was finding Ingvrad's sister and Bastarad's wife like ruined by ether magic. Because I think at that stage it was still like, oh yeah, we did it. We saved the day. We're heroes, and this is a world in which we are heroes, and we're going to save the day. And it was not that. And I was like, oh right, yeah, the gods are dead too, huh? Like. It just was like impactful in a way that I wasn't expecting, and like a real gut punch. And then not having time to deal with it or process it was also really important, I think, to hammer, because it felt like when the Fellowship come out of Moria and they can't stop to mourn Gandalf, it's like, give them a moment for pity's sake. Like you can't, because the airship's crashing and now Calp's dead, and like there was just no time for anything. And that was really impactful. I think it really felt like, yeah, a lot like that scene where Gandalf goes and there's just nothing to be done, you know?
Yeah, for me, I'm a little biased because it was mostly affecting me and kind of centered around Darien. But the second Jeremy pulled up that fucking picture of the Kraken, I was just like, what the? This is not okay. What is happening here? And just like, giving Darien the pirate's mark thing is like not something that we talked about, but it felt so like right in that moment to happen. So like that whole sort of sequence of Darien getting the mark and then the Kraken just like absolutely wrecking that ship in an instant. That whole thing was just, took me off guard in a very good way. And then just sort of having to like go into this Dwarven city where we're gonna have to like prepare to go into hell after just seeing like the literal Kraken destroy ships like inches from us. Brought a whole different color to that whole moment.
On that, like, this is a much lower order thing, but like any game where I get to like have a ship, I am so happy. Like, so when we found that airship, now I will also say that was the dumbest moment for me as a player, where we were like, okay, let's get in this ship and let's go. And we're like, wait a minute, where the fuck are we going? And what are we doing? And like nobody had any idea. And that was the most like aimless, directionless part of the game. But we were like, well, we probably couldn't have stayed where we were. So this might have been a good idea. But also just getting a ship, like that was, I love that. I just having that the whole time.
Not to mention the ship was literally filled with money too.
Right.
Yeah, there was like 50 grand on there, right? Like
I loved being rich. That was fun too. Even as a character that didn't really care about it, it was fun to be like, yeah, whatever. Let's just buy whatever we need.
Was that the ship that was called Righteous Indignation? Or was
the Righteous Indignation is the Righteous Indignation is the one that you guys crashed. I don't think you guys ever named the other ship.
Well, I bring up righteous indignation because I pulled I pulled an act of theft that I didn't realize was an act of theft, and Jeremy caught me because I play a gunslinger dwarf on in Curse of Strahd on Dice on Ice channel. And when I made my first weapon, this pepper box, I named it Righteous Indignation and thought, I don't know where this name came from. This is absolutely incredible. And like within a session or two, Jeremy came on as a guest in one of the sessions, and we were talking about it afterwards. And he's like, yeah, that's really cool. You named the gun after the ship. And I'm like, that's where I got it. Never even, like, it just kind of slipped into my subconscious and lived there. And so now that's the name of my gun in our long running Curse of Strahd campaign. But to answer the question, the most jaw-dropping thing for me is the fact that a character choice that I made to play a teenage warlock, and when I chose the Hexblade, and I kind of, in answering Jeremy's questions that he gave us the questionnaire to develop our characters, I just kind of came up with this loose idea of, since she was a Delver dwarf in hell, that she mined into something and tapped into a literal essence of evil. And that's what spoke to her. And I thought, okay, well, this is just going to affect me because I'm going to play this shadowy warlock. Instead, that became the whole crux of the campaign. It became the reason Ingvarad was taken from us, and ultimately became the BBEG of this campaign. That blows my mind that just a little choice, something that I thought was a specific isolated character choice for myself, turned out to impact the entire game that we played for over 100 hours. And it feeds into my narcissism. So
Yeah, I remember being really floored when that vision came back late in the game for Bastrad too, and like we were all involved in that. I loved that moment. That was really fun to play, because like remembering how it kind of went down for him the first time he had that vision, and being this like horrifying thing where he was alone, versus like the way it ended in the second one. I don't know. I really loved when that came back. Like the amount of stuff that you took from what, the questionnaires. I think those questionnaires really, like, they set the tone for the whole campaign, and they wrote a lot of the campaign, like, in a way. I mean, you very much wrote the campaign in a way by pulling everything together and making it perfect. But like, I just mean that you took so much from that in a way that really made it impactful, because it felt like we had so much control over the story. And then all the times that you passed it back to us to let us do things, there were so many of those, like, each of you give me a thing that you encounter, or, those, like, how do you deal with this moment? And those moments I thought were always, of course, nerve-wracking, because like of the people that I was playing with. I'm like, oh my God, how am I going to like follow that soliloquy? But they always just make it so much more intense and so much more bought in, and I just loved that so much.
Yeah, with campaigns now, that's kind of the recipe that I use. I started this with White Lotus Black Jade, a game that I ran for my home group. And I talked a little bit about it this past week on Help Action with Dave. And I got the idea from Will Wheaton's game that he ran called Titan's Grave, where he pulled NPC connections from the players. He had them establish connections amongst each other. He got a secret from them. I'm like, this is really good, because this informs something about their character before we even start playing. So I started kind of putting together a list of things that I wanted to get from players before I start campaigns. And then I played Dread, and this game is incredible in and of itself. But one of the best things about it is throughout the entire book, on every single page at the bottom, there are these very direct, probing questions. Things like, even though your broken leg healed, what activity haven't you taken up again? They're just very specific and very leading, and I decided to start utilizing that for my D&D games, and it's paid off in spades. Like, the information that people give you are the things that they want to be exploring and doing and talking about in the game. And having such specific information about a character before you even start playing them helps to inform a lot of the rest of the decisions that you make while playing them. Because these things are true, it gives you some place to start with the character and a reference point to have everything else that you interact with kind of base off of those responses. And it's a lot of work to ask of people up front. But go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Well, but I remember one of the questions that I got was like, it was one of the most innocuous ones. It was a little leading. It was like, what trinket that your daughter gave you do you still carry? And I came up with the incense box, which was something that like, it was never like a plot thing, but it was just a thing that I knew he had. And like, I knew that he no longer believed in anything, but still did this one religious practice. And like, that really gave me something about the character and who he was and how much he missed his daughter just from that. Like, oh, he's got something that he holds on to from her, and like coming up with that thing that is still kind of tied to what he believed at one point. So those questions just really, I normally discover a character a lot during play, and this was like, I'm discovering a character who has a much more thorough sketch than I normally have. Like, it's not just like blacksmith's son, parents died. Like, it's like, oh no, this is like a person already, and now I get to fill in like the quirks and the like little personality pieces. So it was just really interesting because you start with such a more full picture of what you're going for.
Yeah, and I think that for me, what that made it really clear in the beginning was like, hey, you can't just show up to this game. Like, you kind of gotta look over your character stuff. And there are games where you can just show up and you're like, hey, oh, I remember this character. But this is like, hey, you gave Jeremy a list of stuff he's going to use to make conflict in the story. So you have to brush up on that. So I had a Google Doc constantly open when we were playing of all the answers that I gave him, because he and you, Jeremy, I'm speaking, you're here, so I can say, you would always treat it as though I knew those answers. And so I wanted to make sure that I did my best not to be like, oh, what did I tell you again? Because you're putting all this effort and time into the session. So it really allowed me to think, hey, as a player, I'm going to bring it. I'm going to know these answers. I'm going to know why I'm answering these things. And if he pulls something weird and deep from the 3rd, 5th, 10th question, I want to have something cool. And so I just wanted to commend you that, like, yeah, it's a lot to ask up front, and it took me a couple of days to give you the answers. But like you said, I'm basically handing you a list of like, hey, here are all the cool conflicts I want you to throw at me. So it was fun to have to, as a player, go, all right, sometime today I got to read through these questions again and refresh myself on who I am,
Yeah, I mean, while we're on the commending Jeremy train, speaking of like GM choices that impacted us and the questionnaires and all this stuff, something that I was just kind of thinking about this game, and like one of the things that I think like makes it especially remarkable. I'm sure there's like little tiny moments where this isn't true, but there's no part of the story that we went through that if you took it out, like the story would continue on like normal. Like everything that we went through had impacts on the story, on the characters. Like there was never, like, I don't think there was a single point where it was just like, this was just kind of a detour to see a cool thing. Like it was everything furthered the game, furthered the characters. And it's like, it's really impressive to see a campaign where that's true, where there's like not anything that you could remove and not have lost something like important to someone, which is, yeah, it's insane.
I mean, most games I play or I have played, I remember moments Like, you know, I never really remember like what the big thing we were doing was, or like what the quest was in that moment. But like this game, I feel like I remember as a complete unit, because like the plot was just inextricable from the moments and from who the characters were. So like I just feel like I don't know, it sticks a lot better in my memory just because there was so much of it that like all mattered to every other piece of it.
Well, I just want to thank you guys. I'm actually going to bounce here. It's funny because you have to choose the nice way to say I have to leave. And it's like, I either take off or I bounce. It's like, we make it sound like so fun. Like I'm going to do something, but
Just going to float away here.
Yeah.
I'm
gonna
let you let me go.
I'm going to let you let me go. Yeah. All those things. But I just wanted to say that, you know, I made a decision early on in the sessions when I saw how great everyone's commitment was to these characters and how detailed it was. It was like being in a writer's room for a really good show. And I just remember having to, for myself, say, I'm not coming in late and I'm less important. I'm just a different kind of important. And so I came in with that heaviness of like, hey, I'm going to pretend like I've been here the whole time. And it was really awesome that everyone else accepted me, because you had a very special story that was woven deeply together. And so to have this outside person come in and still play a part, I just appreciate it. And so thank you guys. It was one of my favorite campaigns, even though it was a shorter one for me. It's one of the most memorable I've ever been in. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Tim. I appreciate that. And as Cole mentioned, whether or not we might be taking a break, I think that's what we'll do. I don't know if everybody else is still good for continuing to hang. I know Tim, and I think you also, Jeff, have to get going. So we're gonna roll onto a break. We'll take 10 minutes, and if everybody is cool with it, then we'll come back and answer a few more questions, chit chat a little bit more, and then we'll call it a day. So sit tight. We'll be back in just about 10 minutes. Hello, everyone. Welcome back from the break. We are going to shoot the shit here for about another half hour, give or take. Not quite, but probably about 20 minutes. And then we're going to call it an evening. So, yeah, Whispers and Fragments, you guys did such incredible work, not only up front with everything that we were just kind of talking about right before the break, but also just of letting things impact your characters in a profound way. Instead of it just being an, that's cool, and then just keep, going and doing your thing, you guys took moments to really internalize what was happening around you and to you, and have it make a big impact on your characters. And that was incredibly rewarding as a game master, to be able to know that I can hand you guys something and you're going to do something with it that's going to be interesting and dynamic. So yeah, that was a joy of running this game for all of you. So thank you for being those kinds of players.
It felt to me often in this game that like the danger was, and it wasn't like the combat wasn't dangerous, because it was, but the danger and the scary parts of this game were conversations, like way more than fighting a baddie. Like having a serious conversation about something was like much more frightening and more tense, I think, in a way. Because like we said before, we weren't worried or scared to get into like the heavy shit, which was, unusual.
Again, I think it takes a lot of trust. Go ahead, Jeff.
I was just going to say exactly that. Like I think it speaks a lot to sort of the trust that everyone had in the group, because I found like with like a serious atmosphere in an RPG is like such a fragile thing. Like it just takes one person making that one comment to sort of take people out of like that like deeper, authentic emotional place. So like the fact that there were so many moments where no one ever crossed that line too far, where it's just like where they broke it. And also, I think we did a very good job of managing the sort of emotions outside in the side chat and before and after the games and things like that. So like, I think kind of both of those things together, both people willing to be there and make sure that we weren't crossing the line. And also that if that moment was happening, that you sort of allowed it to keep happening, that you didn't feel like you had to break up the serious moment either. I think it's just everyone just followed that line very, very well.
Real happy to hear that, because I always worry that I'm chuckle fucking too much, especially earlier on. I was very concerned that was that's just something I'm always worried about.
I fulfill that role in some games, and I've done it in a couple of Call of Cthulhu games where it's become this sort of agreed, this nonverbal agreement that my character ends up somehow playing some element of the comic relief. And I think that's in part, that's just something that I'm comfortable with. It's how I deal with horror games and things like that, which is not my primary thing. But I never felt the need to do that in this game. And that, again, as Jeff said, that's a huge testament to having a side chat, because when you want to crack that joke, you can do it during a serious moment in the side chat. And you might see somebody's face break a little bit. You might see the smiles or somebody shaking with laughter, but nobody's interrupting a really cool scene.
Yeah, and you sort of need it too, I think. Like it's necessary.
Exactly.
And I think this group managed to find balance between like getting each other in the side chat and also just like managing each other in the side chat, because there's also a level of side chat that becomes a little bit too funny in the incorrect moment or whatever, so it was a good balance, I think.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of humor, and the side chat is definitely my place to hang and get all of that out in games. Except the Dawnbringers, that's where I bring a lot of it on screen. But like I'm a massive fan of Tim Conway and Harvey Korman, that were back on the Carol Burnett show. They're two of my favorite comedians, and watching the two of them navigate one another in a scene and try to crack each other and break one another while still getting through what they're doing. It's a very fun, it's a game that we used to play in theater a lot, and it's definitely something that I like having in my games, is that yes, we might be playing through something that's really heavy emotion, and if I feel like it takes a lot of focus, then I'll keep all of that really subtle and quiet. But if I think that they've got a good handle on it, then I'm going to do everything that I can to try to get their face to crack. For sure.
I
Let's
also
see.
like.
Oh, go
I'm
ahead.
just aware of the fact that I'm just aware of the fact that like I'm pretty sure during the most like tense, serious, depressing, awful moments, my face, like if you go back to any of those videos, my face is always like just like beaming and smiling, because like I'm always just so like happy when the horrible shit's happening. Like I said before, like I don't know. So it was always hard for me to like, okay, I gotta stop smiling and like get serious and actually like play for a second. And I was like, okay, now I'm gonna listen to everybody else and like, oh, everyone's mad at each other.
I don't know if anybody's mentioned this before. I think I might have said it once before, but something I really appreciate about you, Jeremy, as both a GM and as a player, is you do this thing. Maybe you're aware of it, maybe you're not, but you give visual feedback to your players or your GM, depending on what role you're in, where you will silently sit back and applaud or cheer for the moments that hit those notes that resonate with you. So you're simultaneously filling the role as GM or player and audience, giving a direct feedback to something. And not a lot of people do that, where, for whatever reason, you outwardly do that. And I'm always catching those. Well, as you mentioned during Dawnbringers, you and V have this whole chuckle effery going on your own that's built into the game for the audience and for yourselves. But when I see movement from your window, I'm always looking, I glance over there, and more often than not, there's this big smile and just this, you're silently applauding a moment that resonated. And it's just something that I've come to really appreciate about you as a role player.
Yeah,
Thank
it's one of the nice things about this being an RPG in a game rather than like a stage play or something where you like everyone sort of has to maintain the illusion at all times. It's like you really can like step back and appreciate what everyone else is doing. And like I can second what Jake is saying, and like it always adds to the experience when you can like say something or see something happen and then like see the other people in their little camera boxes react to what's happening, and like you can see that it's landing. And yeah, you do a great job of showing that. And I think it does add a lot to a game to like let yourself have those facial reaction moments, the jaw drops, the gasps, the like applause, like those little things can do a lot to reinforce the experience without actually ever having to say a word or do anything.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's nice to get the Jeremy clap, but I think I want to rephrase that probably.
Yes.
It's a very specific kind. Oh, that's awful. Yeah, like pretty early on, whenever I started gaming online, one of the things that I realized was the more I allowed myself to just let go and be invested in what was going on, the better performance it drew out of me. The more I enjoyed my games, the more the easier, or the more at ease I was with doing voices and making certain specific choices. So that's my like, I'm gonna just throw myself into the deep end and just not care. And especially as a dungeon master, I'm a huge proponent of the dungeon master should be the player's biggest cheerleader. Like, you should be rooting for the characters to succeed and look badass when doing it. And when you guys do something that's great, even if it's not great for your characters, if it's great for the story that's being told, I'm the first one to pump my fist in the air and say, hell yes, because why not? Like, what do I have to lose to not do that? So yeah, I'm glad that it helps other people with having a visual cue. Cool.
As a sort of
Mhm.
thought about what happens afterwards, like I think like Haroon fancies Ingvarad. That came up once, and I think that Ingvarad would have a different view of like life having come back, and maybe a bit less uptight or whatever. But I think that's something that she would pursue, maybe in her clumsy sort of way. But that would be something for sure. Like, find some companionship and some sort of happiness and not having to be stoic and like be the moral compass at all times. Now that like things are a little bit better, you know?
Yeah, now that she has another license on life, you know, actually being able to experience and enjoy it in a different way, more for herself, because the way Ingvarad definitely felt was she was experiencing life for her faith. Like, she was merely a conduit.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think she would, not more selfish, that's not the right term, but I think there would be more of her and for her going forward, for sure.
She's very much the nun that takes off her habit after this.
Yeah, I think so.
For sure. Cool. Well, we're rounding on the hour, so yeah, if you guys want to, anything at the very, very end here that you want to kind of throw in or talk about before we call it quits, please.
I have a question.
Hmm.
I have a question for, so would Darian, is he going back? Like, you can keep it ambiguous if you want to, but like, I want to know, so I'm gonna ask.
So I was thinking about it, and I think the honest thing that Darian would probably ask is he would probably ask Ingvarad, because he gave his word to the pirate captain that when he came back from hell, he would go back and serve his judgment for, you know, the mark that's been put on him. So I think Darian would ask Ingvarad if he could break his word in this instance, or if he should stay bound to it.
Tricky question. I think that Ingvarad might say something like, well, what worth has the word of a pirate anyway? You know, like, like, would he do the same if it was him? Probably not. I think she'd be less ironclad about that than maybe previously.
Yeah, one last swindle, you know, to
round it out. Yeah.
Well, I think Darian had probably one of the coolest, like, ending character beats going forward. Like, he's the man without a shadow. Like, what a badass rogue like title to be known as. Like, have to live the rest of your life without a shadow. That's instant like notoriety. Like, people are gonna, you know, take note of that, and that's gonna be like a legendary thing that he's gonna be known for. Yeah, it's really cool. A lot of these characters ended up in really interesting places that I could not have predicted from the very beginning of the campaign. I was also really surprised, pleasantly so, but really surprised that Haroon was the only one who stepped through the portal at the end. That caught me off guard.
I was a little sad about that, almost, just because I was kind of thinking like Ingvarad should go with him. Like, Bastrad's into her, but like, he knows that she needs to go be with the Lord of Light. Like, we'll deal with taking this thing out of hell. Like, we can get it out. Like, we got here pretty all right.
Yeah, it might even be the case that like they get like 40 minutes away from there, and she's like, "What am I doing? I already did it all. I'll just go. I already did all the hard work, and you guys seem to have your shit together now. I'm just gonna go hang out in paradise. Like.
I hope so.
gonna
I
say,
certainly
I
like.
heard
That's
that-
what I was.
A similar thing for Darian is they probably get out of hell, and Darian's like, I have to go back. Do I have to go back? Do I actually have to go back? It's like, wait a second. No, like, let's just go. Let's just get out of here.
I imagine that all of that would happen like right at that moment where we have to like transition the gravity again. Like, go to the opposite. It's like, hey, don't come back to the surface. Just like here, like go in there. And then like just, yeah, Bastarad and Caparad.
You think you have is like not actually unfinished. Like, this is the business that you need to finish.
See, I see Katvarad as not feeling worthy to step through. And whether Ingvarad ultimately made the choice to go in or not, Katvarad would have dedicated her life to learning more about the Kalasaya, the faith, probably would have gone back to where Ingvarad was from and taken up with the Bonekin, never going back to the Down Under, and would have taken up a life of service in some way, shape, or form. And I could see that manifesting at some point if she caught wind that there were still fringe groups of people that were dismantling Kalasaya or anything like that. She would form her own group and lead them to take down somebody who started as a complete she was very agnostic at the beginning. I mean, she couldn't be atheistic because she literally was in hell and saw the demons, but she was very agnostic about the Kalasaya at the beginning. And through their own adventures and the influence of Ingvarad, I think she would have leaned heavily into I think the future, not long after this, the future Katvarad you saw, there would be no trace of shadow left. She would have left behind the necromantic stuff and would have leaned full on into the celestial aspects. Maybe she starts a place up where she counsels dwarves, that have seen too much in the Down Under, having her own experience with that. I don't know.
Sets up a church in the Down Under somewhere.
The Church of Hell. The Church in Hell.
Yep.
Not the Church of Hell.
Well, that's awesome. I can't think of anything else, so yeah, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap the wrap party. So again, from the bottom of my heart, thank all of you for coming along on this fantastic journey. This was the first foray into the world of Momentum. This was the first game that I ever got to run in the setting, and I can't think of a better way to have taken that first delve into this world. You guys set a lot of fantastic cornerstones in place that I certainly am going to be building off of as I continue to run the setting. So I appreciate it very much that you made these characters so lovable and relatable, even though the things that they were going through were so horrendous and awful. Yeah, it was a joy to run the game for you guys. So thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure. Like, anytime that you run anything else in this world or any world, and this group of people to get together, I'm there. Thanks so much. It was like an incredible campaign, really singular.
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. This was phenomenal. An absolutely unique and incredible experience for not just you, but everybody here. But you were the facilitator of this. So, yes, thank you. And I look forward to the next time we can game in one of your worlds for 2 years or more.
Yeah, I mean, thank you to Jeremy. Thanks to all the rest of you guys. You were just as instrumental in it as Jeremy was in a lot of ways. So I think this game is probably like the most human game I've gotten to play in. Like, just it captured the most like essential part of like being a person, like the good, the bad, the funny, the serious. Like, you kind of got the whole range of all these people that got to be in this world, and it's like so rare for an RPG where you get in one character to have like such a wide spectrum, and like the development of all the characters and of all the story. It's just like, yeah, it was wonderful from start to finish, like the entire way through, and easily one of the best games I've gotten to be a part of.
Yeah, this is the most memorable gaming experience I've had. If literally any of you ever need another player for something, I will make time, because you're all phenomenal role players and phenomenally creative people, and I really appreciate playing with all of you. So thank you so much, and thank you, Jeremy, because it was just a great experience of a game.
Very happy to have been able to provide you guys the kind of playground, if you will, in order to have that kind of experience. It was, like I said, a pure pleasure on my part. And thank you very much to all the people in the audience. This is probably one of the most watched games on my channel, and there's been a fantastic feedback from the audience all the way through this. I've gotten comments on several of the different episodes of the campaign, as well as just people messaging me and talking to me about it here and there. And everybody kept talking about, just how fantastic all the characters were and how much they cared about the story that was being told and how much heartache that all of them were having to go through, and how wonderful that was. So yeah, it's been phenomenal. So thank you for the people who have been tuning into this, especially with regularity, and who might be fans of it in the future. It truly is appreciated, and can't wait until the next one. So until then, may your dice roll high and your snacks always be within reach.